bases dropped on a new week of soccer down here. It's September 16th. It's an overreaction Monday, and I'm expecting a few reactions. Atlanta loses 3-1 at home to the Columbus Crew in, honestly, a poor match, a poor second half, to be absolutely sure of it. It was just not good enough after the international break and not good enough against a Columbus team that is not the Columbus Crew of the first half of the season. They actually do have a little bit of a very slim lifeline when it comes to the playoffs if they win out, but there's too many teams between them and that final spot. They've been much better in the second half. They haven't been outstanding, but they've been better. 1 loss in their last 9, that's pretty good. A lot of draws mixed in there. Well, they found a way to get past a draw at Mercedes-Benz Stadium Saturday night. It was a big tactical game plan from Caleb Porter that worked to perfection. Players executed very well, and Atlanta didn't really have any solutions to it as the match went on. We'll get into all of that this morning. Tweet your thoughts at us at Soccer Down here. Let us know what you're thinking on a Monday, on an overreaction Monday, and we'll dig into it. But, John, let's just get started kind of working our way through the match a little bit. Atlanta comes out, and beginning is pretty good. I mean, they start out pretty good. Not perfect. It was a little sloppy at times. There were some giveaways that raised some eyebrows, but it was pretty good. And you get a good goal to show for that. And it's in the 19th minute. It's Joseph Martinez. The whole play started with a great ball from Brad Kazan to Emerson Heineman, who takes it very well, then plays a great ball into Pity Martinez. And Pity takes a touch and then just whips one low into the near post that Joseph gets a touch, deflects off of Connor Maloney, goes into the goal. The goal has still been credited to Joseph Martinez. I tried to argue with everybody that night that it's not going to get taken away from him because he gets the touch and it's looking to be on goal or close to the goal. The deflection, changes the direction of it, obviously, but you're not taking that goal away because Joseph got a touch that resulted in a shot. It would be a very big stretch to take that goal away from him. He keeps his goal streak going with his goal in his 14th straight match. It's a great start for Atlanta, but I agree with Frank DeBoer and what he said afterwards, John. Like, you have the lead, it feels good, but you don't feel like you're on top of things completely.
Yeah, and it goes back to the comment that you made about Columbus. This is not the Columbus that the team had faced earlier in the season. They are better, in quotation marks, and you're seeing how they're kind of growing into things under Caleb Porter. But there were times where Columbus would work their way down Atlanta's left-hand side, and Atlanta would be either late in getting there or have to work their way backwards. And there were the 2 instances that pop into my head were ones that created opportunities for Columbus. But you could tell that it was a good start. It was what you thought that they needed coming out, but you weren't the most confident about where things were. It's like, okay, there's a lead, great. There's normally that sense of comfort that's associated with it, or the sense of accomplishment, or whatever word you want to use. But you knew that Columbus wasn't going away as they had in times past.
When you look back at Columbus's season from April 13th through July 13th, they lost 14 times. They won 2, they had 1 draw. They lost 14 times in all competitions. Since then, they've lost 1 time. They have a number of draws. They have 5 draws, 4 wins, but 1 loss from July 17th onwards. And it hasn't all been against weaker competition. They beat the New York Red Bulls at Red Bull Arena. They went to Montreal and won. They got a draw in Chicago. They got a draw in San Jose. They had a narrow loss, and it's the only loss they've had at Yankee Stadium. They have handled things pretty well. And I don't think it's because they were building up play through Atlanta's left side. It was counterattack, and it was some pressure. and it was a well-organized squad from Caleb Porter, because what they did, and especially in the second half as the night went on, they sat a little deeper. And honestly, that starts with the lineup decision on David Guzman and Artur as your two central midfielders, as opposed to Will Trapp being in there to start. Because Guzman is more of a true number 6 from a defensive standpoint than Trapp, who is a ball-playing number 6. You want to play through him. You want the passes through him. He's the metronome. He sets the table for everything. You didn't really care about setting a table. You weren't worried about making sure all the silverware's in the right spots and the napkins are folded up nicely. You wanted to eat. And that's what Columbus did here. They didn't waste time setting things up. They didn't waste time, kind of looking around. All right, let's take the air out of the ball a little bit. Let's knock it around. It was not the Greg Berhalter Columbus. This was the Caleb Porter Columbus that harkens back to his Portland Timbers time, and especially the last couple years of his Portland Timbers time, because at the beginning of Caleb Porter's career, when he first went to Portland and during his time at Akron, he had more in common with Greg Berhalter in terms of possession. We're going to pass. We're going to knock it around. We're going to kill you by wearing you out by passing. And sometimes it was a little aimless. It was just passing for the sake of passing. There wasn't that idea of we're going to pass here to set this up. It was just pass. Realized, okay, we need to do a little different here, because it wasn't working at Portland. It was a little too inconsistent. Had a good year, then a bad year, good year, then a bad year. So they became more of a counterattacking team, and a really good counterattacking team, and that's what took them to a MLS Cup. It's what took Portland back into the playoffs in 2017 with a good season. So Caleb Porter has some time away. He comes in. He takes this Columbus team. He doesn't get really to completely remake it coming into the season because of the ownership change happening so late. There were other things to take care of first. So he takes what was Greg Berhalter's team, and over the course of the season, he adds Yunus Mokhtar. He adds Luis Diaz in the summer window. He adds David Guzman. He gets Connor Maloney playing minutes here. He gets Abubakar Keita playing minutes here, two guys who weren't really seeing the field before. He goes out and he gets Eloy Room after Zach Steffen leaves. It's a good squad. He's got David Akam, who fits that system as well. He's getting a lot out of Luis Argudo. He's making the team into his own, as we've seen here in the second half. And they will be a team to keep an eye on in the Eastern Conference next year for sure. But let's go into what happened after halftime, because it felt like, if anything, he kind of doubled down on the counterattacking style. And the two goals, for me, showed it. Let's start with the Zardes one. So, in that one, it's Escobar pushed up higher. It's Atlanta trying to build up possession. And it's on the left side, and it's a giveaway. Pedro Santos with a brilliant ball behind Escobar, who was pushed up higher than the front three, into space for Zardes. So Jossie Zardes in space to run. Robinson's back. Pogba's back. Zardes is going it alone, but he's getting help as everybody else takes off to support him. Robinson forces Zardes, instead of going north-south, to go east-west, pushes him to the right side. Pogba, looking back at the replay, gets maybe a little too overly aggressive and tries to come in to win the tackle on Zardes instead of continuing to push Zardes wider and make them have to slow down and get set. Pogba comes in to win the tackle. He doesn't. Zardes makes the pass around him to Diaz. Remedi can't get back to fill that space because he's still recovering. That's why you need to delay a little bit there. You don't. Zardes is able to play it around Pogba to Diaz. Diaz forces the big save from Gazan, but at this point, everybody has been crashing backwards to try to defend, that when Gazan makes the save and it comes back out, Jossie Zardes is right there, and he's the only one right there. And he roof sitting. It's a great goal. But the breakdown started with Escobar's positioning when the turnover happened, the great ball from Pedro Santos, who wasted no time. He didn't look for Will Trapp. He didn't look for David Guzman or Artur to play and knock the ball around. He sees the opening, boom, we're going. And then Zardes starts, and then Diaz gets off to the races. Everybody else gets off to the races to support, and Atlanta is scrambling because of a turnover. And we'll get into a couple of the things that Frank DeBoer said afterwards that play into this, but you're not set to defend that counter effectively, and you get burned. And Jossie Zardes does what Jossie Zardes does. He gets a good goal, a good kind of workman-like goal, and Columbus is 1-1.
And I know that coming up in hour number 2, at Just Talks Footy, Jessica Sharman is going to come on because I know that she had said some things specifically about Brad Guzan in that save situation. So it'll be good to hear her perspectives on what she thought about what happened there for that first goal as well.
So then you get into goal number 2, and it's similar in some ways. It's a bad giveaway from Remedi on a diagonal ball that comes up short. And this is where Columbus, again, they're not looking to win the ball and keep it. They're looking to win the ball and shove it down Atlanta's throat, and they do. Harrison Offal steps up to intercept the pass from Remedi in front of Merrim, and with one touch, he's beyond Merrim. And that's not Justin Merrim's fault. Merrim is expecting the ball from Remedi. He can't get it. Offal's gone. Pogba was stepping up. Escobar was stepping up, which means Robinson is by himself at the midfield stripe. Offal, with that one touch, gives him space. Then he bends the ball around Pogba. Luis Diaz is off to the races. I mean, it's almost like you can see it when you go back and you look at the full screen of this. With Offal's first touch, when he gets the first touch and he starts to take off, it looks like a track meet started, and it's 100 meters between Zardes, Diaz, Santos, and they're just off straight out of the blocks. So ball's played down the right side for Columbus, left side for Atlanta. Gets around Pogba. Diaz is gone. Robinson somehow blocks the cross from Diaz the first time because Jossie Zardes is wide open in the middle. Diaz tries to make the right play initially, try to play Zardes right in front of goal. Robinson blocks it right back to Diaz. Now, at this point, Robinson doesn't see what's behind him. He's got cover. Like, people have recovered by this point. He could have stepped out to close down Diaz a little bit more. But we're getting a little nitpicky if we're talking about this, where the breakdown, honestly, was before all of this, where it's Robinson having to sprint back 55, 60 yards, defend 2, and do it, and then he's in a different situation. That's a lot for any defender to have to deal with. He could have stepped out a little bit more on Diaz, but Diaz makes a nice play, cuts it to the left, hits a left-footed ball. It's just a beautiful shot. No chance for Guzan. And now you're down 2-1. The own goal, you're going for it at that point. I'm not even too worried about the third goal and how it breaks down because you've already made your decisions to completely go for it because you needed to. Because the draw doesn't really mean anything. The win is what you have to have. So you're looking for 2 goals at this point. You need them quick. So you go for the game, and you don't get it. And you get punished the other way. The third goal was inevitable if you didn't get one. So it's not good enough in the second half, and Columbus showed something that if you don't think Cincinnati's going to be looking at that, if you don't think San Jose is going to be looking at that, if you don't think any team that Atlanta will see the rest of the way doesn't study what Caleb Porter did here, you're lying to yourself. Like he gave a blueprint a little bit about, all right, sit back, counter with speed, and when you get a chance to counter, and this is something San Jose does really well, you go. You go direct, you go north-south, boom, don't waste time, go. Try to catch them unorganized. Because when you're a possession team and you don't build up the possession properly to stay organized, and you have a turnover, you are completely and utterly exposed, as we saw on Columbus's first 2 goals.
And there's one question that I've had that I wanted you to go back over, and it was something that you and Mike had discussed in Full-Time Report, and it was about the midfield and its makeup itself. And as you and Mike were explaining the makeup of the midfield, the light came on for me about it. And so I completely saw where you were coming from about it, but the midfield itself, go back over that point about the lineup that was there with Remedi, Heineman, Nagbe, and obviously the absence of Ezequiel Barco is a part of this discussion, but what you saw with the makeup of the midfield from the match against Columbus.
Yeah, it's not defined enough because you have 3 guys in Remedi, Nagbe, Heineman who can all do all facets of playing in the midfield, and they're so used to being the ones who adjust based off what's needed. If it's Jeff Larinowitz behind them or if it's Ezequiel Barco in front of them, when it's the 3 of them, it feels a little too much of the same. It feels like 3 guys doing the same thing, and at times they can kind of get into a line instead of having that definition of who's defending, who's the attacking. Where is the definition here? When it's Barco with the team, it plays much more like a 3-4-3, or it's almost like a box midfield with Barco and Pitti tucking in underneath Joseph and in front of whoever the other 2 midfielders are. If it's Jeff, and sometimes it can be Jeff and Barco, but if it's Jeff, he's going to sit deeper and give more license to the other 2 central midfielders to go. If it's Jeff and Barco and it's either Remedi or Nagbe or Heineman, then it's very defined and maybe sometimes a little too defined because Jeff is going to sit more. He has to step up and be a little more multifaceted, and he can do that, and he has, and it's worked. But then it's more of a true 6-8-10 when it's 3-8s, as it is with Remedi and Heineman and Nagbe. It just sometimes doesn't have the proper definition. And when you don't get good performances out of all of them, it can show. And I thought in this one it did. I thought Eric Remedi struggled. I thought he struggled in possession especially. Darlington Nagbe had a couple giveaways. Heineman really didn't have a ton of influence on the match. And going back and looking to see that he created 4 chances, I was a little surprised. It didn't feel that way watching it. But that's it having some effectiveness, but he didn't scare you in the way that Barco does, and he also didn't set the tone and the pace of the game as much as Barco does. I think what Ezequiel Barco does really well is, like we talked about with Will Trapp for Columbus, how he's the metronome. In some ways, when Barco is on, he's the metronome for Atlanta, and it's different because he's in an attacking phase, but you're trying to play in that half. Barco's the one who puts his foot on the gas or puts his foot on the brake, slows it down a little bit or speeds it up. And he also uses his dribble to move the defense around at times, not trying to beat somebody, but he'll do that left to right or right to left dribble to move defenders around to create that opportunity. You don't have that the same way when you have Heineman, which sometimes is good because Heineman is a little more direct. He's going to go a little bit more, but sometimes you don't have that patience that you need, and I didn't think they had the patience as a group overall, and it showed on the second goal especially. Because Remedi plays a ball that it's a bad pass. That happens. You're gonna have bad passes. No team will be perfect in their passing all day long. It's how you deal with them and how you're set up to deal with them is the most important thing. And in this case, you weren't set up to deal with it. When you're set up in the way that you were on that ball from Remedi, it turns over. Nagby's not in the picture. Hyman's not in the picture. Your two center backs on either side of Miles Robinson are too aggressive. They're pushed up too high. And if a team does what Columbus did, they're going to take advantage of it. Now, then they still had to be perfect. This is something to keep in mind here because we've seen this happen at times this season. And Miles Robinson has bailed you out because Miles Robinson's having a Defender of the Year kind of season. And he honestly bailed you out here the first time because he makes, on the Diaz goal, he makes a great play to prevent the cross to Gyasi Zardes. It's just he can't make a great second play because, again, that's a big ask. So you have to be very careful. And when you get into these conversations about patience and possession and being more direct and going for it more, well, when you do and you're not organized properly, this is what can happen. And this game showed why Atlanta needs that patience. And it's something that I thought Frank DeBoer really drilled in after the match, talking about the patience that was needed. It's a critical element of this. If you want to be a team that is just north-south, now let's look at it from a Columbus standpoint. Harrison Awful didn't get forward as much as he typically does because that wasn't the game plan that was required here. Connor Maloney, same. They did occasionally, but they weren't bombing forward in possession because they couldn't, because they didn't have a whole lot of possession. Guzman stayed home a lot. Artur kind of filled the gap some, but he stayed home for the most part. They sat back. They got numbers behind the ball because their game plan was to, when they get these moments, when they get these turnovers and Atlanta is exposed, go as fast as you possibly can. That was the game plan. Work to perfection because they get the right ball from Pedro Santos to Gyasi Zardes in the build-up on the first goal. They get the right ball from Harrison Awful to Luis Diaz to set up the second goal. Those passes eliminated about 3-4 defenders each. And it opened the play up for Columbus. And they didn't have to get numbers forward. They didn't have to be patient going forward. They weren't looking for that. They were looking to ram it down Atlanta's throat when they got the chance, and they did. And Columbus was the better team. What could Atlanta have done in the second half? We'll get into some of that as we go. Honestly, it's getting a little bit back to who you are. And I didn't feel like Atlanta looked like Atlanta enough in this game. They didn't look like the Atlanta that has been strong over the last couple months. They didn't look like themselves. Why? Is it the break? Is it, just a lack of sharpness, lack of rust, or is it rustiness, as DeBoer said? Could be a lot of things, but it's if you're not back to where you were, and you try to play in the same way, these types of games will happen, and they can't happen anymore because now you've lost all margin for error when it comes to the postseason and where your positioning can be. So you don't have any more room to slip up. And you've got, some difficult challenges coming up, starting on Wednesday in Cincinnati against a team that will be feeling pretty good about themselves after going to Montreal and getting a clean sheet 1-0 win. Now, Kendall Waston was red carded in that. He will not be available on Wednesday. We'll get into what that can mean for Cincinnati, what they will look like. After that for Atlanta, it's San Jose. It's a trip to Yankee Stadium. It's a trip to Montreal, and it's New England coming here on Decision Day. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and get into the Twitter timeline and Overreaction Monday. Use that hashtag, tweet at us at Soccer Down here. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Apolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. Overreaction Monday is upon us. Tweet at us at Soccer Down here. Use the hashtag Overreaction Monday. Let us know what you're thinking about Atlanta's loss to Columbus. Any elements from that game you want to dig into. Other matches around the league. It was a ridiculously drunken Sunday around Major League Soccer because every game was just stupid. 7 goals for the LA Galaxy against Kansas City. You can
with
put
the
their
best player ever in
on
the
ice.
history of MLS.
I mean, you say that like it's completely ludicrous. It's not. It's a bold statement for the player to anoint himself as the best player ever in MLS, but that's Zlatan. That's what he does. That's not a shock. It's not 100% wrong. I mean, it's not like he's garbage.
No.
It's just Zlatan being Zlatan, which is what they feed off of. I mean, that's the reality of it. Zlatan wins games for them single-handedly. I think also at times Zlatan can be a detriment to how good the Galaxy can be because they do get so locked in to feeding Zlatan. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. They're such a weird team to read the rest of the way. When they're on and he's on, they can beat really anybody in the league.
Yeah.
But they can also look terrible. And defensively especially, they can look terrible. So you just never know what you're going to get out of the LA Galaxy.
Yes, they are a box of chocolates. We have Twitters.
All right, let's get into Twitter.
Stizzle, yesterday, LGP's stupidity put the team in a bad spot. Miles is tired and the rest of the defense is lacking. Columbus exposed some things. We, in parentheses, not playoff, closed parentheses, ready, hashtag Overreaction Monday.
I don't think Miles was tired. I don't think that had anything to do with it. The goals that were given up had nothing to do with Miles being tired. It had to do with him being exposed because, I mean, Miles has been a bit of a Superman at times, but, man, he can't do everything every single time when it breaks down in front of him. LGP's absence did hurt the team. It definitely did. And the yellow late in Philadelphia in a 3-1 game, when it's done at that point, that's a yellow you can't pick up. I mean, he was going to miss a game here at some point because he was on the tightrope, and it's just how he plays. It's how he plays his best soccer. He plays on the edge. That's fine. That's fine. He will take the professional foul when he has to take a professional foul. He'll eat that yellow when he has to eat that yellow. Those are fine, and if those result in suspension, so be it. It's unnecessary ones that drive you crazy a little bit. And the one in Philadelphia felt unnecessary because it felt like that game was done. The yellow and the decision to make the play that results in the yellow has no effect on that result. So there's no need for it. If he's going to miss a game, pick up a yellow against Columbus and you miss Cincinnati, oh well. But this one, it did show up because Florentin Pogba was not great. he wasn't. He kind of struggled, it seemed like. He seemed like he was in a little bit of slow motion. Passing was okay. He had some good passes. He had some that were meh. But you didn't have the big diagonal that LGP has in his locker that can open a team up. And when you have a Columbus team that wasn't bunkering, and this is where you get into the different shades of how to play on the counter. Columbus wasn't bunkering. They were stepping up and pressing when they could and when they needed to. But when they did get forced back, because they did at times, because Atlanta's a good attacking team and a good possession team, they're going to beat that first line of pressure, and they're going to be able to force you back into your defensive half. When they did, Columbus was really good at switching on to what we talked about. You look for the turnover, you get the turnover, you see the space in front of you, and boom, you go, no hesitation. And that's where they were lethal. So when you don't have LGP, especially in those moments where you do force them back, and you do get them going side to side a little bit, and you don't have LGP to hit that ball 65 yards on a diagonal to Gressel to open up the right side of the field, you're a little more limited. And you didn't have that in this game. And you didn't have him defensively. You didn't have his organization defensively. It hurt. And it did show in those moments where things broke down.
Nathan Pugh says at least Orlando isn't going to make the playoffs. Ha! Exclamation point.
Yeah, they fought back, and, I mean, give them credit for getting a point in that match. They were down 3-1 to New England. They fought back to get it to 3-3, but they kind of had to get a win here. They're not officially eliminated yet. They're 4 points out, but they only have 3 games left. So this was the game against a team that if they had gotten one more goal or if they'd given up one less, which given 3 goals, I'm shocked that Orlando gave up 3 goals. Defense has been their strong suit all season long. New England would be on 39 and Orlando would be on 38. That's how big of a game it was. Chicago had won earlier. Montreal, you didn't know they were going to lose, but they did. Orlando could have been 1 point out in 8th place with a win, and they gave up 3 goals on a night that they could not give up 3 goals. It's classic Orlando, and they're probably going to miss out again on the postseason.
4-Card Ahmed basically thinks that the show title for today, even though it is an Overreaction Monday, should be hashtag moving on to Cincinnati.
Are you going to set that up, or are you just going to leave it there? Because I'm going to assume that most people have zero idea why that would be the title.
Well, and I'm trying to interpret because it looks like some of his stuff got lost in spell check.
No. Bill Belichick. When they lost the game, the New England Patriots one time, because I remember the interview specifically. It's the general
I remember the interview too. It's just that I was looking at his copy, and it looks like his copy got kind of blended in talk to text.
But that's the point's the interview. I don't care about the copy. Give Ahmed some credit here. It's a good pull. It's a really good pull.
Oh, the Belichick pull is very good. I'm just stuck in his copy.
The copy has nothing to do with it. The Belichick pull's the whole point. Because instead of answering any questions about the game that the Patriots had just lost, he's just moving on to Cincinnati. So, Bill, what happened about the defense in the fourth quarter? No, we're moving on to Cincinnati. Well, what happened on the missed? We're moving on to Cincinnati. Well, what about we're moving on to Cincinnati? Any more questions? Bye. Like, that was the whole point. It's funny. I don't think Frank DeBoer is ever going to give that interview. We have 2 hours to fill. We can't just say we're moving on to Cincinnati. We can't just say that all morning because then I think people would get bored pretty fast.
Although I probably should pull the drop in case we ever need it.
No, I don't think we're ever going to need it because it's a very specific one. I think we're good. It was a funny poll from 4-Card Ahmed. I give him lots of credit for that one because I'd forgotten about it. But when I played the clip, I was like, oh, yep, remember that specifically. It's something that honestly I will take the opposite approach if you're looking at it from inside the team perspective because those 2 goals they gave up, at 1-0 up to go 2-1 down, there's a lot of lessons you can learn from those. And there's a lot of things when you break down the film on it, you can show, don't get caught like this. Don't get caught in this position. Be ready for this. Look at what Columbus did. That's exactly what Cincinnati's going to try to do with their speed. They have a lot of speed up top. The simple way for them to play is to get some numbers behind the ball. They win it and immediately go. No questions asked. It's what NYC can do if NYC chooses to play that way. And they might. Dome Tarrant, his job with Pep Guardiola as his right-hand man was a lot of the opposition scouting and creating a plan tailored around the opposition. If he looks at this and says, you know what, we're going to flip this game on its head, get some numbers behind the ball, and go with speed and try to play Matriza in space, Atlanta's going to have problems with that. San Jose is going to approach it a little bit differently, but I think San Jose will take the elements of when the ball turns over and going. And Atlanta has to be ready for these things. New England, that's absolutely what they will do. New England will take that and do what Caleb Porter did to a T, because that's right in Bruce Arena's wheelhouse. So you can't just throw this one out and move on to Cincinnati. You have to address the things that happened in it, because they can't continue. We see these games late in seasons in any sport where it feels like a little bit, if you're watching, if you're not Atlanta related, if you're not Columbus related, you're watching this from afar, you look at this game, you're like, light bulb goes off. That's how we can deal with Atlanta United. And you're going to see teams try to mimic it. So you've got to be more careful. You've got to be more patient. You've got to avoid the up and down game. And this is something that DeBoer said afterwards. He said, we play a very attractive system that if you lose too many balls, if you lose too many duels, if you come in transition, then it's up and down, and it costs you so much energy. We play more forward than the opponent. Then they are waiting so we can make those mistakes. Then they are waiting with Santos and Diaz, who have speed, and they try to punish us, and they succeeded. But it starts with, winning your duels. Don't lose the goals in the second phase, because when you lose the third phase, you have everybody around them, and you can bring the press. Now we are still open and wide. Why do we lose the ball? You may feel that we were swimming somewhere. I don't know if they felt press or from the back, and that was happening a lot. There were moments, as I look back at this and take kind of what Frank said and dig into it a little bit, there were moments where Columbus absolutely sat back and waited for Atlanta and then punished them with speed, 100%. Atlanta won the duels to a degree. I'm going to pull up the stats real quick. I know it was something I was keeping an eye on during the match. Atlanta won the duels 46-37. I don't know if they were necessarily winning the vital duels. It felt like Columbus won a lot of important ones. It felt like Columbus won the second ball often as well. The two things that jump out to me from the stats is Atlanta's passing accuracy in Columbus's half dropped from 84% overall to 72% in Columbus's half, and then dropped to 68% in the final third. I need to go back and compare, but those numbers feel low when you look at the season for Atlanta United. And when you do that, as Frank said, Atlanta plays an attractive style. They get numbers forward. They're very aggressive, sometimes reckless. And if you think of this in the whole context of how the season's gone, these were things that Frank early in the season was trying to get the organization defensively to avoid some of this. They've been so good over the last few months at getting these numbers forward and putting things away and not getting caught. And when they do have to get in transition, they've handled it, that maybe you lose a little bit of that organization. And when you're not winning all the important duels, when you're losing the second ball, these things happen. And when you're just not as sharp in the other team's half and in their final third, you're giving them opportunities to break and hurt you. And that's what Columbus did.
Chris Hutchison says insipid is the kindest description I have for Saturday's performance.
Insipid, eh?
Lacking flavor.
Okay. Lacking vigor or interest is also part of it. And I would take the interest part out, but the vigor I could go with. Maybe even more than the lacking flavor. Let's see what Merriam-Webster defines it as to make sure that we are hitting all elements of insipid. That is the word of the day. It's a good one, too. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, lacking taste or savor, or lacking in qualities that interest, stimulate, or challenge, like dull or flat. Not 100% sure if that's exactly the word. It definitely has elements of it. And some of that is just down to not having a player like Barco. I think Barco brings a lot of flavor. He brings a lot of that taste in the final third. Pitti did at times, and I know there's been another debate about turnovers from Pitti Martinez, and I talked about it from my perspective with Doug Robertson on Southern Fried Soccer afterwards. I don't have a problem with Pitti's turnovers in the final third. I'm not counting them. I'm not keeping track, because in the final third, if you are properly set behind it, that's where you want him to try stuff. That's where you want him to be daring and have that flavor and add that to this team, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen Pitti Martinez make a pass this season that I'm just like, how did he see that? It didn't look like anybody on the field was expecting it, not in a bad way, and it's such a good play that it's, oh my God, how did he see that? And that happened some against Columbus. He had a couple that were turnovers that were just not well played. That happens. But with a creative player, you want to let him create. It's where his turnovers happen that are an issue. I don't remember any major ones in bad spots. I think the thing about Pitti in the Columbus game is he was streaky. He was kind of struggling to find his impact on the game, even in the first half a bit. I mean, the assist was great. He had some moments. He didn't get a ton of the ball, which was a little surprising, because I expected him to pick up some of those touches with no Barco. And it didn't really feel like he did in the dangerous spots. When things started to fall apart in the second half, when the goals were scored from Columbus, Pitti definitely tried to do too much. And he tried to get it back with one amazing pass. And he was a little too risky at times there. And it felt like a little bit of a misread from him, in that I felt like the team needed to string some passes together, show some patience, to get some confidence back. And Pitti, if he had pulled it off, again, then we're having a completely different conversation. If he had pulled off a magical pass through to Joseph and you get an equalizer, then forget it. We all shut up. But he didn't. And it didn't feel like it was coming. That's why I understood the substitution to bring on Vasquez and go for a little bit more of a direct play at that point, because you're running out of time. But I thought Pitti really made an effort to try to get the team back into it. It just didn't come off. That's where that lack of flavor, that lack of stimulation was. You didn't have Barco. Pitti was all right. I'd probably give him a 6 out of 10. Not bad, but not great. And there wasn't anybody else to give you that. And those are the moments. Justin Merrim and Julian Gressel can give you that sometimes, and they didn't really have much of an impact on this game. It felt like a lot of crosses that were not going to find anything. And that's something that Atlanta has a bad tendency of when things get a little difficult, is just force it wide, force crosses in, and see what happens. And it doesn't feel like that's the way to play. It feels like in those moments, that's when you do need to find Pitti, and he has to find that balance between trying stuff and keeping the play moving through the middle Pitti being a player who brings a Barco or a Nagbe or a Heineman into the game and gives them opportunities and then looks for the second ball. It just wasn't quite there. I will agree with insipid as a good word here. I think it does work.
Master chefs aren't known for punching buttons on a microwave and creating good food. It's pulling the stuff out of the fridge, going to the store, and then making it on the stove.
Yeah,
that's just what I've always.
No, that's true. But there's times when you're just freaking hungry. You know, like it's not an either or. It doesn't have to be an either or. And I think the best players in those moments, the best players in the world, know when it's time to cook an unbelievable meal, but they also know when it's time to keep it simple and put some pizza rolls in the microwave. And that's what it has to be at times. It felt like this was one that, all right, keep it simple, knock it around a little bit in those moments. I appreciate that Pitti was trying to win it, get the goal back very quickly. Just felt like he forced it a little bit. You can work from that. It's better to work from that, in my opinion, and I've always had this about players like this. I'd rather have the player try to do too much than not ever try to do anything.
Right.
You can rein in a player who's trying to do too much sometimes. You can't bring the personality out of a player who's afraid to do anything. That's the harder part. That's a much more time-consuming part. Let's take a break here. Get some more tweets into us at Soccer Down Here. Use the hashtag OverreactionMonday, and we'll dig into them right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire, and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Final segment, hour number 1. Soccer Down Here, September 16th, Overreaction Monday. Digging into Atlanta's 3-1 loss to the Columbus Crew. We'll probably dig into it a little more tonight for Soccer Over There, live from the Brewhouse Cafe on Little 5 Points. Come out and join us if you can. We're going to really dig into the Champions League getting started this week. Some really interesting first matches of the group stage that start tomorrow. Liverpool-Napoli, for one, is one I'm very intrigued by. We'll get you set for Champions League. We'll look back at all of the leagues around the world from the weekend, including Diego Maradona back on the touchline. Diego Cam was quite interesting. We'll get into some of the results out of Mexico that were really interesting. And just the rest of the picture of soccer down here, over there, all around today. 6 to 8. at the Brewhouse Cafe. You can listen live if you can't join us. If you can, come out and join us. Try the new menu out. I'm going to figure out something new to try on the menu because the last 2 times have been great. And I want to get something new. I want to keep sampling this whole menu. So come out and join us at the Brewhouse tonight. What else we got on the Twitter timeline right now, though?
All right. Shiva, what's the best midfield combination until Barco comes back? I think despite our rusty performance, our midfield needs to look better to win these games.
It's a tough one. I mean, if Barco's not there, I think Jeff is really critical. I really do. And I didn't think that would be the case earlier this year. It felt like things had kind of moved on from Jeff playing as a defensive midfielder with this group. But in my mind, the games where he is in from the start, everything feels more secure. It just does. I don't know if for this team, in some ways, Jeff is that security blanket in the midfield that gives Nagbe, Remedi, Hindman, whichever 2 it is with him, especially when Barco's not there, just more comfort in being able to go and play. When he's not there, it feels a little more like, all right, what do we do? Okay, what do we do? All right. It feels tighter. So I really think Jeff is the important element here. And having Jeff in these big games is going to be key. Now, I think you do have to manage his minutes, and you do have to make sure that you're keeping him as fresh as you can, at the stage in his career. But Jeff Larentowicz, to me, could be a critical piece of this team making a run in the postseason.
Michael Ruiz, is Joseph being underappreciated for the amount of goals he scored this season as well as his goal-scoring streak? I think he's being taken for granted, plus the Golden Boot race is heating up after the hat-trick by Zlatan.
Yeah, 100% he's being taken for granted. I listened to the game last night, and it was Zlatan, Vela, Zlatan, Vela, Zlatan, Vela. Oh, yeah, Joseph. It's like, dude, he's scored in 14 straight games. That doesn't happen. As great as Zlatan has been, he hasn't done that ever in his career. Hasn't happened. Carlos Vela, never done that. Never. Never happened in his career. That doesn't happen in, D3 college games. I mean, it's something that it just doesn't happen. And that is such an impressive number that Joseph has put up. The multi-goal games. Now, Zlatan has scored a ton. He's had a ton of multi-goal games since coming to the LA Galaxy, more than Joseph in the same time frame. Joseph has more over his career because he had a year head start. But what Joseph has done in such a short period of time is very, very impressive. And I think he is more of an overall contributor to what Atlanta United is and has been than Zlatan. Vela's a little bit different conversation because of the year that LAFC is having. But there's still, I think, an argument to be made that the Galaxy can be better without Zlatan. And I think they can. I think when Guillermo Barros Escaloto is able to make this team into what he wants them to be, they can be even better than they are. Because right now I feel like they're a team that has to win games 4-3, 5-4, 7-2. They can't win a tight game because their defense isn't good enough, and everything offensively is find Zlatan, feed Zlatan, find Zlatan, because you have to keep him engaged. If you don't, then he checks out and he doesn't give you anything. So that's why I think what Joseph is to Atlanta United is so much more impressive, because he is the focal point. He is the guy that you want to feed. He is the guy that you're going to force things to occasionally. Yeah, because he's that good. But he also gets involved from a pressing standpoint. He also gets involved from a build-up play standpoint. He is more multifaceted than what Zlatan gives the LA Galaxy, and I think he's more multifaceted in what he gives Atlanta than what Vela gives LAFC. I think Vela is a player who is outstanding, but is also a perfect fit because that system's been built for him to get the best out of him. The system has been built to create 1v1s for Carlos Vela and let him do what he does. And he has been great in it. no question. I think this system for Atlanta United is not completely built around just Joseph Martinez. And even the last 2 years, it wasn't built around Joseph. It was built around Miguel Almiron and what he gave you. So Joseph and what he's done is far more impressive than he gets credit for. And I hope that changes at some point. We'll see if it does. I hope it does. But when you have a big figure like Zlatan, when you have what Vela and LAFC are doing this year, you're going to get lost in the shuffle a little bit. And it's somewhat expected, but what Joseph's doing right now is incredible. 14 straight games with a goal. It's just unheard of.
Katie Weaver, not sure why, but I never had a good feeling heading into Saturday's match. Teams seemed to lack rhythm and connection. Heineman's a serviceable mid, but not Barco. Tito wasn't perfect, but added spark. 70,000 games can be weird, either explosive energy or kind of hollow. #overreaction Monday.
I think Heineman's more than a serviceable mid. He's not Barco. He's not that good going forward, but he's better in build-up and deeper in the field. He's just a different type of player. It was a little hard to read coming into this. I thought, because we didn't see training sessions, we didn't see what was going on in the build-up to this. I thought that the rest would have this team looking sharper, and instead they looked rusty from the break. So the Philadelphia game, I threw it out, honestly, because the team looked tired. That was a different element to me. Philly's good, but the team looked tired too. And from Atlanta's performance standpoint, that was my feeling coming out of that. So, no, I didn't have a bad feeling coming into this. I felt like Atlanta was a better team. And Atlanta should have done better here. I don't think there's really a way to brush it off. It needs to serve as a wake-up call, because the opposition that they face the rest of the year is just going to look at this game and say, can we replicate that? And I think a lot of the teams that Atlanta will see the rest of the way can, and will make the decision that that's the best way we can do something against Atlanta. So Atlanta has to be better. They have to learn from this. They have to move forward, and we'll see how it looks. We'll see what Jessica Sharman thought about it. She's going to join us after this, and we'll get her takes on the match and everything else going on around Atlanta soccer right after this. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 SDH on a Monday. It's an overreaction Monday. Atlanta 1, Columbus 3 from Saturday night. That puts Atlanta right now in the third spot in the Eastern Conference. It's not going to be easy at all to get to that top spot with NYC's win. It's still possible, but you're going to need help now, and you're going to need help, honestly, to get past Philly in the number 2 spot. Eastern Conference race is going to come down to the wire, and we'll see how Atlanta learns from this loss to Columbus. It's a Monday, and on many Mondays, we are joined by Jessica Sharman. Jess talks footy with an IE on Twitter. What's up, Jess?
Yeah, it wasn't the best weekend of football or soccer, I should say, for any of my teams. Reading took a loss. Atlanta United took a loss. Oglethorpe took 2 losses. So, honestly, I'm just hoping this week can be a better week of soccer for us all, Jason.
Yeah.
Codswallop.
Was not fun. It was codswallop. How exactly does that translate into American English?
I'll keep it PG-13, but basically a load of rubbish, a load of garbage.
There we go. Yeah, I wanted to give the closed captioning for some of our listeners who might not know that term. So.
Absolutely. If you watch Harry Potter, you'll know it from Hagrid. He's the profound speaker of that word.
There we go. What do you think about Saturday night? What stood out to you about the issues Atlanta had, especially in the second half?
For me, just the defensive disorganization. I'm not LGP's biggest praiser all the time. I think he has some issues with his hot head and potentially game management at times, but there was a big hole in the organization of our defense today, and the missing, or Saturday rather, and the missing piece, I believe, was LGP. There wasn't quite that leadership in the middle, and there was a lot of disorganization. I praised Miles in the middle of the game, and I still believe he deserved that praise. But as you said earlier on in the show, he can't do everything. He can't be Superman all the time. And the issue with Miles is I think sometimes he still has that potentially immature mentality where he wants to cover for everyone. He wants to be closing the ball, closing the player, closing the man. And at times, because he is trying to cover for other people's errors, most notably Pogba and his lack of positioning on Saturday night, that then draws Miles out of position, which then puts him in a position where he cannot be as effective in his role in defense. And I was a little bit surprised. I don't know. I'm not sure. Parky, I know he's getting old. I know he's slow. I know potentially with the Pogba Parky, it would be lacking a lot of pace, but I thought potentially his leadership in the middle would have been helpful on Saturday, because I just felt like there was a lack of communication and a lot of players on our back line out of position. And for the goals it showed, because one ball beat 4, 5, 6 defensive players. And that's not just good enough for us. And that's something we've grown to see Atlanta United being a great defensive side. And on Saturday night, it didn't look like that at all.
But, Jess, I think at the same time, this is the time of year when you want to learn the lessons of a match like Columbus, because you sure as hell don't want to learn these lessons in the postseason. But you know that the tape on this is going to get out. You know that everybody's going to be paying attention to it. But if you're going to have a match like this, have it now, get it out of the way, make sure that you've learned your lessons from it going forward, as opposed to having it happen later on.
Yeah, I agree with you. With the playoffs being one and done, you can't have games like Saturday night in the playoffs, because that's season over by then. So you're right. If it's going to happen anytime, let it happen now. But at the same time, as you both mentioned earlier, it is making the playoffs look that much more of a difficult round to get through. But at the same time, wherever you play in the playoffs, you're going to have to win that one game. So it's better to have your off night then, and hopefully we can raise our heads, have a good game on Wednesday, a good game again at the weekend, because we need that momentum, and that's what's important. You want to be a team coming into playoffs and knockout football with positive momentum behind you, a winning streak. You don't want to be that team that's just dropped off the curb and is disappointed with how the season's ended, because you see that in Europe all the time with playoffs. It's often that team that makes a surge to get into the playoffs rather than the team that's had a downward spiraling performance that does well, because they have that confidence on their side. So we want to be building that confidence for the remaining games of the season.
Yeah, and there's definitely time to do that with the matches coming up. Now, it's a lot of games in a short period of time. This is an interesting spot because sometimes I think some teams feed off of having a game quickly after a bad loss. Others don't. How do you feel like Atlanta comes out in Cincinnati on Wednesday?
I think they have to come out with a completely clean state of mind. You can't be dwelling on the lessons, of this game. You have to rebuild and realize what you did wrong. And we just need more defensive organization. LGP obviously back from the suspension, and hopefully we see a slight change in how he is. I'm sure we won't. I'm sure he'll probably pick up a yellow card, but he just needs to be smart about picking up yellow cards. You discussed that earlier on the show, and I couldn't agree more. It's okay when it's professional fouls or smart fouls that break down the build-up of play, recovery fouls. But when you're picking up fouls for dissent or silly shirt pulls, stuff like that, that's where you can cost a team. I would like to see us playing more in the midfield. I think all of our midfielders had off games on Saturday. Merrim, it shows how much of an impact Merrim has had, because I felt like he was pretty silent or potentially predictable on the flank all night on Saturday. So he needs to hopefully use that one as sort of a kick up the butt and realize that he is a key player for us now on that wing, and we need better deliveries into the middle. Because I feel like it was just all very predictable. We tried to play out wide all the time, and sometimes you have to change things up a bit.
From an athlete's perspective, Jess, let me ask it this way. You mentioned taking the match from this past weekend, putting it behind you, and getting ready for the next one. Mm-hmm. How is it for an athlete, since you've been through academies and, you've been through this. So what is it like for an athlete to try to put something aside and focus on the next one? How difficult is that to get to that point mentally where it's like, okay, it's second nature to put the bad one behind you and get to the next one?
Yeah, it's definitely easier said than done, and it all depends on how you feel you performed individually. As much as soccer's a team sport, obviously you care about how you've contributed and played as a team. I know as a goalkeeper, speaking from personal experience, it can be tough because if you've made a mistake or you feel like you've contributed to a defeat, then you might be replaying that one. But you have to have a goldfish memory, a short-term amnesia, because you have to forget that. Otherwise, it's going to dwell on your mind and alter the way that you play. So it is tough, but at the same time, these are professionals that have been playing a long time, and you just sort of have to move on to the next one. And as cliche as it is, it will impact your game if you don't. So it's one of those things where you don't have a choice but to forget it, because you know that you're not going to be playing as well if you're dwelling on that last one, and you're going to be costing your team. So fortunately, I don't feel like anyone had potentially bar, I point my finger at Pogba a little bit. I think he was out of position a lot, but no one had a shocking mistake. Robinson with an own goal, but it was one of those where if he hadn't have touched it, I think the man on the back post would have finished it. So there wasn't any glaring, huge game-altering errors. So I think it should be easier for Atlanta United to put it behind them today, whereas, if Guzan lets a ball through his legs, those ones are a lot more difficult to forgive and forget.
Yeah, that's what's interesting when you look back at it. And usually with these types of games, I don't dwell too much on it once we kind of finish things up with a full-time report. I don't go home and watch the game again immediately. I want to give it a little bit of time to breathe. And when I went back to it and looked back at the goals and how things kind of broke down for Atlanta here, it wasn't glaring individual mistakes. It was kind of team breakdowns and things that you can work on and things that you can change. And I think things that this team has done well with avoiding for most of the season. But Frank de Boer mentioned patience a lot in his post-match comments. And it felt like Pogba being out of position at times. I thought Escobar, even though he had I think Escobar had an impactful game, but at times he was caught out of position as well. He just wasn't punished for it in the same way that Pogba was. Mm-hmm. Those things don't happen if the team shows a little more patience. If Barco's not in, who is going to be the player who gives this team that patience in your mind?
Well, you talked about Jeff Lorenovitz earlier, and I agree with you. I think he offers that defensive stability that allows other midfielders to play in a more comfortable role. When you've got Jeff sitting just in front of the back line, he's able to sit and have that discipline. It helps the midfielders around him to be more free-flowing. I think a player like Heinemann thrives when he can get the ball at his feet and look to distribute the ball instead of being too worried about sitting. You talk about Escobar, he likes to bomb forward, and at times I think you have to have someone that has that defensive mind to sit and cover rather than leaving those gaps in the back. So I think Jeff Lorenovitz, despite his age, he has that maturity and the positioning that allows him to get away with potentially what he lacks in speed at times. So I would say Jeff has some minutes in him, particularly if Barco isn't available for the foreseeable couple of games coming up.
Now, I know that there were a couple of other things, Jess, in your post-match analysis that you went after when you were discussing Codswallop in general. I know that there was some stuff with Brad Gazan that you were talking about when it came to saves and rebounds. What else stuck out to you from the weekend?
Yeah, and I've watched it back. Maybe I was a bit harsh on Brad. It was a good strike, but as a goalkeeper, you're always looking at the area that you parry that ball into, and I think he did parry it too straightforward and back to Zardes. I mean, it was a brilliant strike by Zardes, and if he hadn't hit where he had hit, I think either Brad would have got back and recovered, or I believe it was Escobar on the line that it just went over his head. But as a goalkeeper, Brad's going to always look to improve himself, and I think the area that he parried that ball into wasn't the best area. We talk about the danger zone, and he did parry it right back to the danger zone because, of course, there was a Columbus crew forward in there. And then the other thing I talked about was Tito Villalba, and it's just a shame because I don't think he's the player that we remember from 2017. And of course, he hasn't got minutes under him, but when he comes on the field, he's so desperate to impress right now. He wants to, do something amazing and sort of make a statement. And I think that's impacting the way he plays. I don't know if you both remember, but there was a free kick. I don't know, probably 35 yards out, and Tito stood over it, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, I don't think this is one to shoot, but he knows he's got a strike, and we've seen it before, but at the same time, that there needed to be a delivery into the box. But Tito is so desperate to have that wonder moment because he wants to point towards he deserves a start, and it's not just coming for him. And it's so hard entering a game as a sub. It's hard because everyone else is warm. You're sort of not had those touches on the ball. And for a player like Tito Villalba, whose first touch realistically isn't his strong point, he's quite an unpredictable player when it comes to his touches. I think he needs to start a game in order to thrive, because when you're throwing him in for 15 minutes, it's so hard to find his rhythm. And I think there's so much pressure on him that he isn't the player that we know. And it's a shame. And I don't know how long he's going to be an Atlanta United player for, just speculating there.
Yeah, that part I'm not sure on, because I think when you get into an off season and you can kind of reassess, then things can look very different. But I'm with you on the start, because I think it would help him settle a little bit more in what he can give you as a whole package right now. When you go back and look at his contributions in this one, he was playing. The move was really interesting. I didn't expect it to play out the way it did. It was a pretty bold move from Frank de Boer. Villalba was playing the wingback role that Julian Gressel typically plays. It looked so
weird. And that's what when I was watching it, he just isn't. I was terrified because Tito isn't someone that usually has major defensive responsibilities. He's usually someone that you play in your top three and he's bombing on. He might come back to pick up the ball in the halfway line, but you're not expecting him to be working back and defending. And on that right-hand side, I felt like we were going to be exposed. And it just looked weird because he had to sit. And you could see he was doing what he was meant to do. He was sitting just above or below the halfway line. But that's not where you want Tito Villalba on the field.
It's tough because, and that's the move to the 3-5-2. It takes away a lot of the places where you can play Tito. And that's what was interesting about the way this worked out. It was a bold one, and I think as the game went on, Tito kind of did what he had to. He pushed forward even more, and Gressel was sliding back over to the right to cover for him. By that stage, Columbus is putting more numbers back, so you can afford to do it. He created a chance. He had a successful dribble. He had a couple good long passes trying to open things up. Mm-hmm. I think he forced it on the free kick, but the contribution was okay in hindsight. But I'm with you. I think and this is where you really wish you'd gotten a win here, because then you could take a little bit more of a chance with the Cincinnati match and maybe rotate it because you're coming in as a confident team. And you
but now
start
it's a must
him.
Win.
Now it's a must-win. Now everything's a must-win. And do you risk it to try to build his confidence back up? Because I think the way to try to get something out of him right now, and it's very risky because of the moves you'd have to make to accommodate it, if you want Pitti on the field and Barco's not available, you play Tito and Joseph more as a true front two together, and probably Joseph is going to be the one who's going to drop off more, and Tito's going to be more of the front runner. And Pitti's going to move into the other role that will have more defensive responsibilities. If you play Jeff alongside of that, it's risky. I think it's doable, but it's risky. If you make the decision, if you're Frank DeBoer and you look at this and you say, I know I'm going to need Tito Villalba here at some point. I need to get him some minutes to build his confidence back up. I need to give him a start, and the only way to do it, I think, in a 90-minute match, because I don't think you can play him as a wingback over 90 minutes.
No, you can't start.
You can't risk that. It's less risk to play Pitti as a 10 than to play Tito as a right wing back over a
and
start.
You talk about adding Jeff, and Jeff, like we just said, will offer that balance potentially that as much as PT has his defensive responsibilities, they're a little bit less than they would be without a Jeff Lorenovitz back there.
Katie Weaver, so I'm going to bring in some of the listener questions.
No worries.
Jess, this is one of Katie's thoughts. She goes, so based on Jason's analysis this morning of the game, I'm guessing the guy behind me screaming, go, send it in the whole game may not have had his UEFA A coaching license. But seriously, more crosses? Yes.
It just doesn't work like that. And that's what, look, I'm never going to be that footy snob. I love that everybody here is growing to love the game, but we have to realize that creating chances, and just because you have chances doesn't mean that they're good, worthy chances. Stats, and again, I don't like to say this, but Americans have this obsession with stats, and stats lie. Stats are misleading, and they don't always equate to, what the game was really like. And when we're forcing the ball into crosses, I think Columbus had our number on the crosses. Look at how I mentioned Merrim. He wasn't able to get quality crosses in because they were blocking them or they were defending well. And just dumping the ball in for someone like Joseph, who, yes, has a leap on him, but is often man-marked by two defenders, isn't going to equate to a good chance on goal. The patience is the key word, and as much as it might be not the most exciting thing to go back and recycle the play, it's the safest way to do it and to not force the chances. We talk about that all the time. Do not force a ball into the box, because next thing you know, keeper picks it up, a poor cross, and they're on a counterattack. And that's kind of what we saw a lot of with Columbus. They were getting the ball and making the right decisions when they did have the possession.
I'll go a step beyond that on a couple elements of it. I think teams that just pump in crosses are lesser teams. They can't create chances from the run of play. So you're basically buying a scratch-off lottery ticket and hoping it comes good for you, because you're playing a 50-50 ball, or sometimes less, depending on the team's quality defending. And you're just hoping to get lucky in a lot of ways if you're just pumping in crosses. I don't think Atlanta plays well when they pump in crosses. I think Atlanta plays well when they play passes from wide positions. When you look at so many of the assists of Julian Gressel, for example, it's not just pumping in a cross and seeing what happens. It's him getting his head up. And I'll always remember what my good friend Ricardo Montoya said, talking to kids, put a name on the cross.
Yeah, you should know who you're playing that ball to. And that, I wouldn't call that, like you say, it's not really a cross at that point. It's a low-driven pass into an area.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be a looping one. Like you go to the one, the header that Joseph had on the back post. I can't remember which game it was now. Julian thought he had overhit the cross, but he put it up into a 1v1 situation. It's Joseph on the back post. Julian thinks that there's a little bit of separation, puts it up there. Cool. I'll take Joseph's odds in a 1v1 with a center back. But when you're just pumping in crosses, you're not looking for those. You're just putting it in there and seeing what happens.
That's hit and hope.
The numbers, and I think with stats, they don't tell the whole story like they do in other American sports, but they can give you color to the story. And what jumps out at me when I look at the numbers on the crosses here, Julian Gressel, 11. Justin Merrim, 5. Those are your two wingbacks. So that's 16 crosses coming from the two of them. 3 were considered accurate.
Yeah, and that's not good enough. And
that's
that's
a lot of
I
giveaways.
think if you compare that with previous games, that's probably a really low hitting accuracy rate compared to what we've been used to. And that's why it did look from the outside like a player like Merrim wasn't having his usual game, because we've been so used to him always finding a player with those crosses. And then one thing I did want to talk about, though, was the ghost goal. I'm not sure if you guys see it when you're on the radio, but man, that was crazy. I can't believe that the stadium really announced that one as a goal. I guess you're so used to Joseph.
I had it the whole way.
I turned around and said to everyone in the section I was sitting in, guys, that wasn't in. It was side netting. But it was crazy. And I did put on Twitter again that, look, it wasn't an easy finish for Joseph, but that's one that the Joseph that we know would be expecting to finish, and I'm sure he would want that one back. And it would have changed the momentum of the game. Put that into the net, tie up the game, and all momentum is Atlanta United, because Columbus is a team that when they concede, their heads drop. They were in a position that they probably weren't expecting to be in, or they would have definitely been delighted to be in if you'd have offered that to them before the game. So for them to concede in that moment, I think it would have swung things in Atlanta's favor and probably allowed them to push forward and potentially get a winner.
Yeah. We've also got other folks talking about other stuff. Sean Vergara, we've discussed the midfield. Sean had a thought about the midfield, but he says, were you guys just as frustrated as I was leaving the bins? I haven't had that feeling ever that I can recall, Jess.
Yeah, it just felt flat yesterday, and or Saturday rather. I'm losing track of my days. It felt flat, and it was very disappointing. And I think what made it more disappointing was we had quality players out there on the pitch. We weren't really missing too many players, but it was one of those games where you're excited. You're coming back after the international break. You're hoping that these players are rested, because a lot of people have been talking about fatigue and things like that. So you're expecting something big, and it just didn't come. But for me, it wasn't so bad, because it wasn't like heartbreak at the end. It was sort of lurching, continuous disappointment, because at halftime, I even said, I turned around to the people I was watching the game with, and I was like, against a better team, we're already down 3-0, because they are exposing us so much right now defensively. And then obviously that's what happened. We conceded, and it was just disappointing. I wouldn't say I was like heartbroken walking out. Fortunately, we still got time to spin things around, but it was just disappointing. I think that's the key word. It was disappointing, and I felt a bit deflated, because coming off the international break, I was expecting more of us, particularly against Columbus.
Hey, Jason, can we get a lightning bolt or something?
Ooh, okay. There you go. What do we have?
On Sunday, September 8th, Soccer in the Streets held its annual Black Tie Soccer Game. This year, the Black Tie event raised $115,000 for Soccer in the Streets. The top fundraising team was the black team with $51,000.
Pretty good stuff. Two big fundraisers coming up here with the Julian Gressel golf tournament and the Black Tie game that raised, I think, combined over, it's over 200,000. So that's a couple station soccer pitches and programs and et cetera. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a great event. Honestly, it's always a fun one, getting to play soccer in a dress. Kevin Egan will mirror me that we got robbed by a dodgy referee. I believe the referee might have been in costume in his referee attire. I'm not sure he was a U.S. soccer qualified referee.
No, he was. I know the referee, actually. I know this referee, and yes, he has. I don't know if he's currently certified. I haven't checked on his current licenses, but I know he has been certified, and I've seen him.
This gentleman believed that the goalkeeper could not score during the flow of play. So
we had have been on the tape. I'm not saying that he was 100% accurate here. I'm just saying.
But at the end of the day, it's a fundraiser, and that's exactly what it was, a fantastic event for a fantastic cause, and, developing the next range of not only soccer players, but also leaders in the community. So it's always an exciting thing to be part of. And I tell you something, playing in a dress actually improved my touch. So I'm very happy with that.
Wait. Okay, how did this happen?
I'm not sure.
What did it force you to do?
I think it just made me think more. I was more conscious.
You were locked in. You were focused.
Exactly. And I also didn't want to look stupid. I knew there was a photographer on me. So, a couple of good strikes on the ball, and it went well. It was good. And Kevin Egan screaming down at me to make sure I got a good touch, obviously probably helped the situation too. He's quite the motivator, we'll call Kevin.
He's vocal.
Yes. He's your leader at the back. He's what Atlanta United needed in the center back position to lead the team up the pitch and keep them organized on Saturday.
Yeah, didn't really have that. It got very disconnected between the back line and the midfield, and hopefully that's something we see going forward. I want to touch on the word that it felt like. I think your word deflated and disappointed is where I would be too, leaving the stadium on Saturday. I wasn't frustrated because I didn't feel like Atlanta was the better team.
It didn't feel like we were robbed. We didn't deserve the win.
In other losses, I was frustrated because it felt like they should have had points coming out of it, or more points coming out of it, like Red Bulls, where it was a draw. You should have closed that out. Cincinnati, it was an individual mistake that caused the goal. Can't have that happen. You should have gotten 3 points there. Results like that are more frustrating to me. This one, Columbus was the better team. They had the game plan that worked, and Atlanta wasn't good enough. That they just were not good enough. Now, I will be frustrated if you don't see a better performance on Wednesday, and if you don't see a better performance next weekend against San Jose, because now those games are far more vital than they were going into Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it does put more pressure on, but hopefully we can thrive under the pressure, because it's one of those things, as we said, momentum is a key word as we come to the end of the season, because the playoffs are unforgiving, and whichever team usually has more momentum and is feeling more confident and secure in themselves is the one that's going to come up on top.
It's going to be a big-time run-in in the East with a lot of teams still left. In the West, I think that number's narrowed, but the placement of said teams is all over the place at the moment. And with a one-game playoff series, there's no margin for error, and the home team has such an advantage. It's going to be a fascinating next couple of months in MLS as we get down to it. And Jess will be talking on a regular basis about it. We'll be talking on Friday with Oglethorpe back in action in Brookhaven too.
Yeah, we will. And Oglethorpe obviously needing a great result on Friday, having picked up 2 losses this weekend, a tough time for them in Virginia. But if anyone wants a football fix on Friday, I tell you something, I was extremely impressed by the standard, and it's really fun to talk about. And of course, if you enjoy listening to Jason and I talk soccer, then it's the best way to catch us on a Friday evening.
Yeah, now I will go frustrating on their losses over the weekend, because I felt like they were the better team in both and should have come out with wins, or at least taking it to extra time. And those were frustrating watching them back. One was a last-minute winner from Washington and Lee yesterday, and the other one was played in a driving rainstorm on Friday night, and it was difficult to play the way that Oglethorpe wants to play with the ball on the ground and combining. But they stuck with it, and they tried to play their game, and they played well, but not quite good enough. I still think they were the better team, and a little hard done by on a couple penalty calls that they should have had, but it's where you're at with a college team. It's a short season. Every game means a lot. Now they have to win their conference and win the conference tournament to get into the tournament. So every game means a little bit more. And we'll be back Friday and Sunday. So you've got an opportunity to see 3 games this weekend. Honestly, you have a chance to go see the 2s as well on Wednesday and watch. You can pull up on your phone the first team, and you can go out to the Proving Ground and see the 2s play. And then Friday night, it is Oglethorpe and Brookhaven. Saturday, it's Atlanta and San Jose at the Benz. Sunday, it's Oglethorpe again in Brookhaven. So you got plenty of soccer to watch all week.
Yeah, who doesn't love soccer?
And Champions League, too. There's stuff happening. It's a big week, so we'll have plenty to dig into. Jess, thanks as always. Talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Talk to you then.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of your questions and comments on Twitter right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back, SDH, September 16th. Overreaction Monday, getting into all of the reactions from the weekend. Atlanta loses to Columbus. The rest of the season is a little more complicated than it appeared it might be heading into that one. Matt Doyle just murdered somebody on Twitter, and it's really funny. The Cooligans had to chime in. It was that bad.
Oh, wow.
And I agree with what Doyle said yesterday because it's something we talked about in our messages. Doyle tweeted, one of the nicer under-the-radar stories of the season is TFC turning Richie Larea into a very, very good attacking fullback. Maybe not very, very good, but very good. I think he's definitely better there than he was as an attacking midfielder. It just wasn't working.
Yeah.
But no, the kicker is the last line in the tweet. Amazing how many guys hit their groove once they leave Orlando.
Oh.
Well, then a Purple fan chimed in and said, amazing that you can't name anyone else. Weak. This is what Doyle tweeted after that. Donnie Toya will also be starting in the playoffs. So will Justin Merrim. Tony Rocha is a key sub for the second-best team in MLS. Mohamed El Munir is a key sub for the best team in MLS. Yoshi Otun is balling out in Liga MX. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that left Orlando that have been far better than since they were in Orlando. But, can't name anybody else. Weak.
Nope.
Oh, that's just mean, but true.
I believe that would be where you would have the microphone in your hand and then let gravity take over as you let it go.
No, that's where you would go grab a lot of stacks of paper cut into shapes of an L and then throw them at this person.
Take your fingers and put them attached to your forehead?
Yes.
Okay. Down with that. Daniel Price has a series of Overreaction Monday thoughts.
Oh, boy.
The first one says, he says, I'll start hashtag Overreaction Monday off right. Why do people watch soccer? It's a terrible sport. It's unforgiving, and everyone's out to get us. The universe is against us, and we should feel bad about it. Hashtag depression.
Overreaction, yes.
Yes.
I prescribe you listening to Disintegration by The Cure.
Best album ever.
Yes.
And Daniel went on and continued and said, it was a rough game with unfortunately not too many takeaways. They just have to be better in those moments and just be better in general. A lapse in any sort at this point in the season is unacceptable. They need to get it together, push past it. This was my reasonable take from the weekend. Hashtag Overreaction Monday.
You have to have patience in the moments that you have to have patience. And that's not every moment, but it was moments that you needed it in this that you didn't have it, and you were punished for it. Every time Columbus got out on the break, they looked dangerous, and Atlanta didn't create enough with the opportunities where they pinned Columbus back, and it wasn't a good enough performance. And my concern is that it creates a template for other teams to try to play against Atlanta, lesser teams and teams with speed up top. For Columbus, I look at this one, and this is, in a lot of ways, a blueprint they can use going forward. And if that's the case, you wonder, do they try to get Federico Higuain back, or is it time to call time on his time in Columbus? It could be. We'll see how he recovers from an injury that ended his season early. Pedro Santos has looked, just amazing as a number 10 after a year where he didn't really look all that effective playing out wide. That's a big difference. Luis Diaz and Yunus Mokhtar are great fits for. I
was going to ask you about Diaz.
Pace. I mean, Diaz was really good, but you can't overreact to it, because what did Diaz show? He showed pace. Yes, he's fast. He showed a great ability in the moment after his initial cross was deflected to right himself, beat Robinson on the dribble, not to get past him, but to create space for a shot, and it's a great finish. Outside of that, what did Diaz do? What was his contribution? Well, he wasn't asked to do a ton. He was the outlet. He had 2 shots. Both were on target. The other one was the save that led to Jossie Zardes' first goal. He had 31 touches, so he didn't see the ball a ton. You look at it defensively, okay, what did he do on that side of the ball? He had a tackle, he had an interception, so he wasn't pinned in defending a lot. On the dribble, he had 1 successful dribble. I mean, when you look at his production, it's not massive. But what he did was he stretched the game because of his speed. Now, long-term for him, you've got to get more involved. 5 crosses, none of them were on target. That's not good enough. Passing, not good enough. You've got to be, more impactful when you have the ball, especially in these moments where you're not going to have a lot of it. He only had 19 passes and just over 30 touches total. But he's 20. And you see the building blocks of what could turn into a really good winger in this league. He didn't dominate the game, and that's why, when you ask, what do you think of Diaz? I mean, he did his job, and he's fast, and that was his job, was to be that guy who could break down a team that was not organized, and he did on a couple of occasions. That gives you a blueprint, though, where you build more into him and he can become a more impactful player. Mokhtar, I think, is a player who is better on the ball and can do more on the ball than Diaz at this point, so they're a good counterbalance for one another. But when you play the game that they played at the Benz, are they going to play that game at home? Probably not. So then how effective is Diaz in build-up play and other phases of play? That's what you have to see going forward for him. But in this game, he was a perfect fit.
Eichmann, going around a point that Jess made in her segment, is the fact that we're on a third-string left back the reason we aren't seeing Parkey at center back when LGP is out. And then Pogba and Parkey are both too slow to play together, ? Would have liked to have seen Parkey and Miles paired with LGP out.
Go back to the question about Parkey and who paired together?
Would have liked to see Parkey and Miles paired
before
with
that.
LGP. Oh, Pogba and Parkey are both too slow to play together, ?
You're not going to leave Escobar out. That was the point that I wanted to make for sure. You're not going to leave Escobar out in that case. He's ahead of both of them on the depth chart. And I think, look, honestly, Pogba has played really well. I mean, this was Pogba's worst performance with the first team as a starter. He had earned the start. Nobody coming into the game was calling for Pogba not to get this opportunity with LTP suspended. It wasn't happening because Pogba had delivered. He deserved the start. He didn't deliver in this one. Does that open up possibilities going forward? It should. I think it should. And I don't think the left back issue is the question for Parkhurst here. I do think the speed was a bit of an issue because you knew about Luis Diaz and you knew that he could be a problem getting around that left back. I think sometimes what people look at when they look at the center backs and they're like, well, how does the center back match up with the winger from the opposition? They shouldn't on a regular basis. That's not the 1v1 that you're looking for all day. That's not the matchup that you're looking for. They shouldn't, because the center back should be getting help from the wing back. And often they do. So that's not exactly it, but Pogba had been better as of late than what we had seen from Parkhurst in his previous appearances. I think Pogba had shown more. He deserved the start. He didn't deliver. Does that open it back up? It should. Going forward, can Parkhurst play with Miles and LGP? Yes, he can, and I think he can be effective there. Is that the best setup? Not if Escobar's available. Escobar, LGP, and Robinson is your best starting three in the back. No question about it. Is it Parkhurst or Pogba next in line? That's the question. Because when you look at the possibilities, Robinson as the central of the three, I hope we've gotten past that point that early on where it was a lot of consternation about Robinson being in the middle instead of Parkhurst. You're playing it differently this year. It's not the 3-5-2 that you saw last year, so you can't look at what worked last year and say that should work here. Robinson needs to be the deepest because you're wanting to get your other two guys forward into the play because you're playing a very expansive, aggressive game, a very attractive game, as Frank DeBoer says. And Robinson is the one who's got the pace and the closing speed to clean it up when it breaks down, as we've seen so many times. So Robinson has to be the central. Parkhurst can play on either side. LGP can play on either side, although he's better on the left. Pogba can only play on the left in my mind. Escobar is far better on the right, although I think he can play on the left if he had to. Escobar is better if you go to 4 or you play him as a left wing back than as a left center back. That might sound a little crazy, but as a left center back, you're looking for that ability to play long if possible, and Escobar is more one-footed with his right foot, so he's going to have to play back to his right foot and then hit the long ball. That's an extra touch. You're not always going to have that. I think Escobar is more on the right side. Pogba is definitely on the left side. Parkhurst and LGP can play on either side, and you want Robinson in the middle whenever he's available. When he's not available, then it becomes different, and you can't be as expansive because then you're going to have to play LGP or Parkhurst as the middle of the three, and they're going to be more as a true sweeper, but they're going to need more support because they don't have that same speed.
Sean Dolzar, Caleb Porter put on a masterclass, but followers of him back to his Akron days never questioned his bona fides. I'm still bitter about Sean Johnson's howler in Nashville that cost the U.S. a spot in the 2012 Olympics because I think he could have led that team to a medal.
I don't know if he would have led that team to a medal because they didn't look great in the tournament as a whole. And he was very different at that point. Look, he's a far better manager now than he was then. He would not have played this game back then. He would have been stubborn and said, we're going to play our way, and that's it, and we're not going to change. And I think that failure, and not just because of the howler, but because of the way the team played in the tournament, they shouldn't have been in that situation. They should have went further. And I think some of it was Caleb Porter was still learning. And it was the same when he first went to Portland. He still had things to learn. You have to have some flexibility. And I don't think he had that early in his career. He does now, to where he can play on the counter. There was an interview with him at the beginning of the season that I thought was really interesting, where he talked about having philosophies, and he was asked about his passing philosophy and playing, a 4-3-3 and a nice passing style and possession. And he said that, I don't remember if it was he was talking specifically about Akron or just early in his career, that he had a couple different philosophies, and now he has 100 different philosophies. That's what young managers who get past that first part of their career hopefully progress to, where you're not as limited. Because in this game, if Columbus had come out and tried to dominate possession and it didn't, what would the plan B have been? I don't know. I don't know if they could have switched to that. I think in 2013, Caleb Porter, first year as a professional manager, he would have got run out of the building because they wouldn't have had the ball. He wouldn't have been able to do anything else. This one, they came in knowing that they weren't going to have the ball, and they came in with a tactical plan and sitting Will Trapp, who has been a vital part of Columbus over the years, sitting him, and I don't think it had anything to do with his national team duty because he didn't play against Uruguay. He played against Mexico. He didn't play against Uruguay. He was fresh. Sat him because it made sense for the way the team wanted to play. Guzman was the better option here, and he delivered, and you played to your strengths, and you played to exploit something that you thought you could against Atlanta, and he did. So I agree. It was a masterclass from Caleb Porter, and I think he is adding more layers to who he is as a manager that will serve him well, and it's going to serve Columbus Crew very well.
Joey Logan, 5 words. 2 weeks off definitely showed.
Yeah, it did. The rustiness. I mean, that was something that DeBoer mentioned afterwards. It showed. There was another team that plays in a way that has a lot of similarities to Atlanta United that is based on playing attractive soccer, that's based on playing a possession game, that's based on a rhythm game. There's another team in the world of soccer that had a shocking loss over the weekend. Who was it?
Manchester City.
Uh-huh. They look a little rusty to you?
Yeah, now that I think about it, because I was trying to process it, because I was watching bits and pieces and more surprised than anything else.
Well, that you gotta analyze it and go a step further. Like, what was surprising? I mean, one, Norwich didn't play as Columbus did. Norwich didn't sit back more. Norwich played how Norwich
had more injured players than they had healthy players.
That's not the point. The point is how they played. Manchester City was rusty and not at their best after a break, and Norwich played their game. Is this Columbus's game? I don't know yet. Maybe. I think partially at least.
On that day it was.
That's not what I'm saying. Is it their game? I don't know if it is. It might be their game going forward. Remember, this is a Columbus team that was not who they were 2 months ago. So I don't know who Columbus is at the moment. Could this be who they become? Yeah, absolutely. If you've got the pace you have up top, if you've got the team that is good on the ball, but decides, you know what, we don't have to have it all the time. We've got the pace. We're going to soak up some pressure and then just be ruthless when we go forward and go north-south and go fast. That's an effective way, and that might be the way. We'll find out over time. But Norwich and theirs, they just played their game, and they were better and sharper, and their game was not as reliant on the rhythm that Manchester City's was. Just like Atlanta's game is more reliant on rhythm and sharpness and, I think, reps than Columbus. And if you have a couple training sessions where it doesn't feel like it's there, and you have a game like this where it doesn't feel like it's there, you gotta find it now. And I would expect today's training session for Atlanta United to be pretty intense to try to find that and get that back. Because then if it's not there, you have to make some decisions. All right, we're not where we want to be in this way. We don't have the rhythm. We're not feeling it yet. So how do we protect getting 3 points? Because now you have to think that way. And I've already seen some of the people suggesting, like, do you go to a truly defensive game like Tata did in the postseason last year? The comments that would happen if that's the case, oh, my God. People will lose their minds because that's been the talking point all year, even though it's exactly what Tata Martino did last year in the postseason, and it won a cup. I don't think you have to. I really don't. I think you have to take the lessons you learned against the Columbus Crew and use them going forward. You have to be more patient in possession. Instead of turning defensive and turning your back on wanting the ball and playing the way that you play, I think you have to double down. And I think you have to double down on possession and be more patient with it and say, all right, we're not going to waste it. We're not going to give it away cheaply. We're going to make sure that we use the ball to get ourselves set up properly, both to create a chance and to defend if we turn it over. We're not going to play with fear, and we're not going to play with recklessness. I think those are the things that Atlanta has to do going forward. But if you have a training session today, if you have a training session tomorrow, and it's not great and it's not sharp, you have to think about how to approach the Cincinnati game, knowing that that could be what happens, and understanding that, you know what, we have to get 3 points here. We have to play with what we have at the moment, and if we're not as sharp as we can be, then what do we do? And that's a tough spot to be in. But those are the decisions that you have to make this time of year. I think for Atlanta, it is patience, patience, patience. And it is dominate possession and play keep away and eliminate the bad decisions in terms of going too quickly, not letting plays develop, and cutting down on bad turnovers. You can't eliminate it. You wish you could. You wish you could be perfect passing, but nobody can be. But you have to cut it down on the ones like the Remedi giveaway, that Harrison Awful, one touch, he's past your first line. One pass, he eliminates everybody else but Robinson. Can't happen. That type of moment just can't happen.
Let's see. Also on the board this morning, Tafka. At this stage, the most important race for me is getting more points than the second-place Western Conference team. If LAFC falter, then the MLS Cup is there to be hosted. East second seed would be nice, but not as important to me.
Yeah, that was something that I said, not quite in that detail on the broadcast, was once it got to 1-1, Atlanta had to go for it, because second or third doesn't really matter at that stage. First is what's important, and you have to go for the win. Well, they didn't get it. Now, you just have to win out. I mean, you know, you're second, third, not as big of a deal. You don't want to fall to fourth, and I don't think they will. They have 2 games in hand and a 3-point edge over Toronto and DC. So you look pretty good to finish top 3. Can you get into second? Yeah, you can. Can you get into first? You're going to need help. You're going to need help both ways. But can it happen? Sure. You just win the games in front of you. You just take care of the business that you can control. It's all you have to do. And I think you do have to think about now, because first is a little beyond you. You can think, all right, how do we need to play as we get into the postseason? And the decisions that you got to make. I think the way, from what we've seen for most of the season, is to play the way that you play. I don't think you need to make that change and become an ultra-defensive team and change who you are. I don't think it would work. I don't think it would be as effective as it was last year. I don't think it's the way that, from what players have said, I don't think it's the way that they want to play. So, okay. Then you need to be better at playing in the way that you want to play in. You need to be better at, all right, we want to get players forward? Cool. Let's do it in the right way. Let's do it in an organized way. Let's not have bad giveaways that lead to big mistakes and lead to big chances. Let's do it in the correct manner. So now you can focus on that. And that's the more important thing, because you can't control what happens in the West with second place. You can't control what happens the rest of the way in the East. You just have to build your game to be the best team you can be in the postseason and let the chips fall. That's where you're at now after this loss.
Jorge B. with a couple of questions, and some of them we've kind of discussed, or the first one we kind of did. First one, did the 2-week international break hurt us instead of help us?
You needed it. Maybe just 1 week would have been great, because you were tired after Philadelphia. You had played 15 games in two months. That's brutal. It adds up. I mean, that's a lot of games in 2 months. That's, 2 games a week? I mean, for 2 months. It gets into your system. And when you factor in a Campeones Cup game, that's a different level of intensity. An Open Cup final, that's a different level of intensity. An Open Cup semifinal in Orlando, that's a different level of intensity. You factor in the travel to L.A., to Seattle, to Portland over that span of time in July and August, and it just wears you out. So you had to have a break. 2 weeks of a break, I think it went beyond like getting rest to getting rusty. And now you've got to get that back quickly. So this game has to serve as that wake-up call and that lesson for it can't be like this. Even when it's not sharp, even when it's rusty, you still can't make the mistakes you made on Saturday night.
The defense looked unorganized without LGP. Who is the best replacement for him?
Well, I mean, that's what we just got into. I think coming into it, Pogba was next in line because Escobar, Robinson, LGP is your back three starting if everybody's available. That's my opinion. I think that's your best setup. If LGP is not available, Pogba had earned the right to be next in line based off his performances. They'd been really, really good. Wasn't on Saturday. So does that mean it's an open competition again? Yeah, I think so. I think Parkhurst might get the next opportunity because Pogba wasn't good enough here. Either way, it's going to be different because you don't have the same things that LGP gives you. So LGP in the team on Saturday would have been better. Would they have gotten a win? You don't know. You can't say that. If Barco and LGP are in, does Atlanta win? We don't know. We didn't see it. I think you have a better chance of it. I think you play better. But you don't know. So it's hard to say. But when you lose anybody that is critical like that, like an LGP, like a Robinson, like a Barco, like a Joseph, like a Pitti, it's hard. And you have to accommodate the new face in the group. And Atlanta struggled to do that. Pogba didn't play up to the standard he had showed previously. And Atlanta as a group, as a system, didn't really protect him either because they were very loose with possession, very loose with positioning, and that exposed him a little bit.
Third question. Portland and D.C., I noticed both ARs were women. Is this the first time it's happened?
Yeah, people went back to try to figure this out, and I think it is definitely the first time it's happened since 2000 in MLS. There was a little bit of uncertainty as to whether it had happened in the first few years of the league. It's possible, but I don't think it did. I'm trying to think, going back into the Portland-DC game, was there anything where the ARs had an issue? I don't remember anything with it. There was a VAR issue with a goal. It ultimately didn't affect the result. I feel like the VAR rushed a decision when he didn't need to because ESPN had the camera angle. They had the target goal cam, which gave you the angle of it appeared to be over the line from the angle the ESPN gave you. And afterwards, pretty soon afterwards, the AVAR sent in the angle that they had that made them feel like it had not crossed the line. But the angle, that shot, didn't give you any context because it's a still shot. Is the ball moving out? Is the ball moving in? It's not on the defender's foot and their space, so it looked like a goal to me. It looked like it had crossed the line. And I think by rushing that decision and not getting all of the angles, either they didn't know that ESPN had it and had a different angle, because you don't normally have that angle. You don't normally have the target goal cam. That's on ESPN matches. It's not on Fox matches. It's on ESPN matches. Did they just not realize that they had that possibility? Did they just rush it and decide, okay, we got it. Yep, it's good. Because it was a free kick, and it was a free kick for D.C. I don't think D.C. is going to argue they want to take it quickly. That felt like a really poor application. The ARs, right, the AR can't get there in that moment with all the chaos of that ball going over. And they're much further away than anything you're going to get on video. I think the ARs did a good job in that match. The offside decisions that I saw appeared to be correct. Good referees, good referees.
Eric Englert, yeah. Eric Englert, back to our midfield discussion, thinks that the two best midfield looks are Barco Rometty Nagbe or Jeff Nagbe Hindman. I like having some defined roles, either central attacking mid or central defending mid with two flexible eights around them.
You can. I think Barco, I think you can play Jeff and Rometty or Nagbe or Hindman, but it's probably going to be Nagbe. You can play Jeff, Nagbe, and Barco. That can work too. But, yeah, you have more players than you have spots for. And I agree. I think the definition is something that it jumped out at me in Los Angeles in the moments where it fell apart late in the first half. It felt like the three central midfielders kind of all were eights, and nobody was the six that you needed in that moment. So that's when I started zeroing in on it a little bit more, and this game felt like some of that too. Not quite as pronounced because Columbus wasn't attacking through the midfield in the same way. They were looking to get on the break, but the lack of organization partially due to that. So it's something that I think when you're putting these pairings together, it's something that Frank DeBoer has to be careful with. And I think it makes Jeff Larentowicz an important part because he is the safest from a defensive standpoint that you have. Mo Adams is different, and I think you could even see at times closing a game out with Larentowicz and Mo Adams. But Jeff is that security for this midfield, and I think he's going to play a really important role down the stretch. And if that means that one of or two of Rometty and Nagbe and Hindman have to start from the bench, then I think that's what it has to do to get the best group out there to start.
Shiva, if teams are going to replicate and can replicate what the Crew did, what can we do to change heading into the postseason? Can we become a more defensive team like we did last year under Tom?
Nope. You don't get more defensive to deal with that. I think that's the wrong way to do it. I do. I think you have to do the things we've talked about. You have to be more patient. You have to not give away possession cheaply and early in the build-up. Pep Guardiola said something that a lot of people laughed at, but I completely agree with. Now, is it maybe slightly exaggerated? Sure. But the effect is important here. He said you have to make 15 passes before you're truly organized to attack. And he's talking about that from the flip side. Because if you make that many passes, you have brought your whole team forward, and you are organized. Yes, to attack, but also to defend a counterattack. And you go back and you look at, and this is what I'll ask people to do, is go back and look at the ball from Eric Rometty. It's 1-1. Look at when he plays that ball, what the positioning is. And look at what happens after Harrison Offal takes the first touch after intercepting it, what the positioning is. It's pretty shocking, and it's something that you just can't do. You can't play that ball in the first place because if you underhit it, you're dead. So I don't think you can. I mean, you can say, you know what, we're just now all of a sudden not a good enough team with the ball, and we don't want it. But the reason it worked last year was you had the best player in transition in Major League Soccer history in Miguel Almiron. You don't have that now. Barco and Pitti are not those players. Barco's some of it. Barco could do a reasonable facsimile of Miguel Almiron, but that's not his game. Pitti's not that guy at all. Those are guys who want the ball, and they want the ball in positions that they have, the buildup has been created for them to go 1v1, to slice a defense open. You can't play the same way with different pieces. The puzzle doesn't fit. I think the way Atlanta United should play is the way that they played. Probably, I mean, if I'm looking for a facsimile of what game I would try to copy game after game after game, it might be NYC. I probably lean, and now that it's been a little bit of time, I need to go back and look at it. I felt like watching it live that the game in Portland was the game that Atlanta United can replicate reasonably.
Yeah.
because it had the right combination of, yes, we have the ball, yes, we're organized, yes, we're patient, but also, yes, we're a little more defensively secure, and we're a little more protected. That's the game that I feel like you look at, and if you can replicate that, so then when it's on, then it's on, and you play, and you open up, and you just wreck a team's day. But when it's not on, you can defend, and you can defend as needed and then look to attack in a little bit different way, as we saw in that goal early in the second half with just a great ball from Gressel that splits everybody, and Joseph does what Joseph does. That's the one that I think you're looking at, which is not entirely defensive. You can't replicate what happened last year because you don't have Miguel Almiron. I think you're a better team with the ball than you were last year by far, and you should play to that strength. That's the strength of this team. You shouldn't run away from it. You just have to be patient, and you have to be organized to deal with the inevitable mistakes that'll happen. I will never be a soccer guy who looks at the game like Jose Mourinho did eventually. He didn't at first, but as he had some failures in his career and as things evolved for him, he became a guy who said, no, I don't want the ball because when you have the ball, you're going to make more mistakes. Well, yeah, you are. But if you have the ball, you can control the game. And you have a far greater chance of controlling a game for your favor and winning it if you have the ball than if you opt to create your game plan on not having the ball. I think you have more limitations when you play that way, and the Red Bulls are an example of that. I think it is a limiting way to play if you decide to play and create your strategy around, we don't want the ball, we're not going to have the ball. It can work. It can be effective sometimes. But is it a long-term strategy for success? I don't think it is. And I don't think you should be afraid of having the ball. I think you should strive to have the ball. You should strive to have that organization around your team so when the mistake happens, you're good. But you should also count on your talented players. And Pity Martinez, Ezequiel Barco, Joseph Martinez, Julian Gressel, Justin Merrim are guys you want on the ball. You want them to get a lot of touches. You want them to have a huge influence on the game. And I think if you get overly defensive, then you lose that element.
Couple more before we go.
All right.
Tafka says, on Doyle's destruction of the OCSC fan, it's like watching a train about to hit a stalled car. Oh, no, this is going to be bad, really bad. And here it comes. And he posted a pretty funny GIF of a human whose head is on a toy train track, and the toy train runs into her face.
I've seen that GIF. That's a good one. Yeah, it was funny because, I saw the tweet yesterday, and I agree that's been something that's been really helpful for Toronto. I think maybe Larea's qualities as an attacking right back are a little overstated for effect, but that's all good. But, yeah, I didn't even think of all of those. But you knew that there had been players that had left Orlando and went on to success, and there were other players. One that we've seen firsthand in Justin Merrim. And Donny Toya is a regular for RSL. And Donny Toya was a guy that Orlando wanted in the expansion draft and made the deal with Atlanta to give up their first-round pick to get Donny Toya, and then they didn't really he didn't really do a ton in Orlando. He played some. But Atlanta flipped that pick into Julian Gressel, and the rest is history. That doesn't mean that Orlando would have drafted Julian Gressel, because everybody felt that Julian Gressel was a reach at 8. That was the common conversation that day. He was projected anywhere between, I think 14 and 18 was where most mock drafts had him going.
I thought I remembered 15 when we were doing the show that day, yeah.
Yeah, he was, a mid-first round to second half of the first round. 8, people were like, whoa, okay, I don't get it. And it's worked out. So I don't think Orlando would have had him. I don't know if they would have done something different, but they didn't really do much with Donny Toya. So there's a lot of players that have left Orlando and been better. And then the flip side is there's a lot of players who've went to Orlando and been worse. Dom Dwyer, I think, is a prime example.
Yes.
Sasha Kljestan got older, so it's not all Orlando on that one. I think
it's different.
I think the legs went for Kljestan a little bit, and that would have happened wherever he was. Ori Russell is a player that I thought was outstanding with Kansas City, and then he went, back to Europe, and he comes back, and it's like, that's a really good signing. It hasn't really been that. So we'll see. I think, again, Orlando's better than they've ever been. Are they going to get into the playoffs? It sure doesn't look like it at this point. They had to win the New England game, I think, to get there. They're not out yet, but they're better. They're not good enough yet, and will it change? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
2 more before we go. Daniel Price wants to know the likelihood Tito gets picked up by Miami in the expansion draft.
Who knows? The expansion draft, here's what'll happen, and we'll do it too. The season will end, and all the rules will be out there about who you can protect, and everybody will do mock protected lists and write a ton of words about it, and everybody will be incredibly wrong about it. And then those lists will come out, and everybody will then try to figure out, all right, well, then now who's going to be picked? And everyone will have mock expansion drafts, and then everybody will be really wrong about it because we don't have all the information. We don't know contract situations. We don't know option amounts that need to be picked up. We don't know if somebody's under contract for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. There's an option. There's only an option for 1 more year. We don't know any of that stuff. So all of that factors in. I think what we've generally seen in expansion history is that it's not players like Tito Villalba that get picked in the expansion draft. It is players who are on small contracts, players who have room to grow, players who can be depth pieces, because you're not looking for impact in the expansion draft for the most part. You're looking to go sign a guy like a Carlos Vela, build your team around him. Sign a guy like Miguel Almiron, build your team around him. You're looking for more of pieces that you can either trade or pieces that are going to help you. LAFC. Tyler Miller, they saw him as a potential starter. He had been the backup in Seattle. He's behind Stephen Fry. He wasn't going to be the guy in Seattle. It wasn't going to happen. Stephen Fry is still one of the best goalkeepers in the league. They went and they grabbed Tyler Miller first. Okay, they picked by themselves, too. That also factors into it when you have one team picking versus two. Their second one was Latif Blessing, who has worked out really well, better than he was at Kansas City. Bob Bradley identified him, thought he could do different things with him. He's gotten the most out of Latif Blessing that we've seen. Marco Arena was a serviceable forward for them. They moved on from him probably about midway through year 1 when they were able to go get Diamande. Yuka Rayatala and Raheem Edwards they picked, and then they traded to Montreal to get Laurent Simon, who they got about 6 months out of before he went to Europe and then came back, and now he's with Toronto. So they got 2 players that have really impacted them in their second year. They've got 2 players that made it into their second year. And you would probably say that LAFC's expansion draft was pretty good because they got 2 guys that helped you. Cincinnati, it's a little too early to take much out of. We'll go one more back to the Atlanta and Minnesota one because this was the last time that it was 2 teams picking. Atlanta got the first pick. They took Donnie Toya. They flipped it for a super draft pick that was already set up. That worked out because you scouted well and you identified what you had available in that draft. If you had burned that pick, would it have killed you? No, but you would have had one less effective player, and that would have had an impact on who Atlanta United is. Minnesota took Chris Duval, and they flipped him to Montreal. So the first 2 picks were players that were going to be flipped. Atlanta took a flyer on Zach Lloyd next. Injuries never allowed Zach Lloyd to be what he was previously. That was a worthwhile risk, and it didn't pay off. Colin Warner was Minnesota's next pick, and he gave them some time, and now he's playing in Denmark. Clint Irwin, you flipped back to Toronto. He was unprotected. They couldn't protect him. You flipped him back to Toronto. I'm trying to remember what you got in that flip. I want to say you got TAM or GAM. Or
I was going to say, wasn't that an AM flip?
Yeah, you added some more chips. Minnesota took Mohamed Saeed, who they then traded a month into the season to Colorado. And they got Sam Cronin and Mark Birch. Birch gave them a couple of years before his wheels fell off. Cronin had injury issues, and he hasn't been what they thought he could have been. Mikey Ambrose was next for Atlanta. He's been a serviceable piece. He's had bad injury luck where he could have had big opportunities, and it just didn't happen for him. Jeff Attinella was Minnesota's next pick. They moved him for, I believe, a draft pick. They traded him to Portland. Alec Kann was next. He ended up being a really important part of 2017, and he's been a really good number 2 behind Brad Kazan. Minnesota took Femi Hollinger-Jansen, and they traded him back to New England about a month into training camp. So, how important is the expansion draft really? When you look at those names, and that's from 2017 and what these teams did with it, none of the Atlanta players, Alec Kann did, but Alec Kann was starting in place of Brad Kazan, who was not available until the summer. But none of those players for Atlanta started opening day, let alone year 2. In starting roles. So I don't think Villalba would be, this is a long-winded way to get to this, but I don't think Villalba would be a guy that, from what we know, would be somebody that Miami or Nashville would pick. But we don't know his contract situation. We don't know what the numbers look like. And we don't know what they're going to have maybe at that point, because they could have already made some signings or had some things in place that they're waiting to announce. They might not need a Tito Villalba. There's going to be a lot of things said and written about the expansion draft, and none of us know what we're talking about because it's so hard to predict without all the information.
Last one, and I know that you could probably go for another full segment. No, but this one, you might even have to just sit here and tease it and carry it over to soccer over there tonight.
Oh, jeez.
Jorge B. According to 0221.com, Diego Maradona is making some radical changes at Gimnasia. He brought a priest to bless the team. He banned the numbers 13 and 17, and he also banned the green color from the dressing room.
Yes. Is there anything else to it?
No, just that. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what Jorge B. was saying about Maradona and Gimnasia.
Diego's crazy. We all know this.
Yeah.
There's no logic in any of that. It's all crazy. Diego, I believe before the 10th minute of the match, he had probably crossed himself at least 15 times from the
Diego Kim was amazing
field to sitting on the bench. He was losing his voice by the end of the first half. Diego, but then the flip side is this. Every player for that team, which is a bad team, they're in the bottom of the relegation table for a reason.
All out.
They're not good, but they gave everything they had to try to play for Diego Maradona because he's freaking Diego Maradona.
Uh-huh.
There is not a comparison to what Diego Maradona is in Argentina. There isn't. There's nobody. Pelé in Brazil, not the same thing. There's nobody else. Nobody. No sport, no nothing. There's nobody to compare him to. He's Maradona. There's just nothing else to say. And when he's in a role like this, look, Gimnasia probably getting relegated no matter who they picked. This is a wild card of all wild cards to play. They have sold a bunch of stuff, a bunch of tickets. They've gotten more attention than they've had in maybe ever. And it's the Hail Mary of all Hail Marys. Maybe somehow these players play over their heads and get enough points to stay up. They're not like in a complete and utter hole in the relegation table because the relegation table's over 3 years. So it's narrow, but they're in it. There's others who can fall into it, and if you get a few results here and there, you can get yourself out of it. I didn't know green was bad. I didn't 13, yes, we've known that 13 is potentially an unlucky number. I didn't know anything about 17 for Diego or for Argentina or for the Argentine call. I didn't know 17 was a bad
and
thing.
Apparently players had those numbers, and they were trying to figure out other numbers and kits on short notice.
Yeah, you can't because you can't change the squad numbers. Like, it's not about printing a new kit. It's you can't, like, change it because the season's already underway. So, like, there's really nothing you can do there. I guess maybe he just closes his eyes when he looks at those players. I have no idea. It's Diego. It's all kinds of chaos. We might be doing something at the Brew House when the documentary debuts on HBO. It's October 1st at 9 o'clock. We might do a show prior to that or something. We're going to have to figure it out. We would do it in soccer over there, but it's a day I'm coming back from Montreal, and if we're going to have a Diego show, I'm going to be there for it. So we're going to figure something out with it. At a minimum, we might do a viewing party for the documentary at the Brew House for that. So stay tuned. I can't wait to see this thing. The trailer's insane, and Diego's insane, and there will probably be crazy things that will happen between now and that thing debuts. There's a couple weeks for craziness to happen, and in Diego's
just
world,
take your money, HBO.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. We're going to take a break now for a few hours. We'll be back with Soccer Over There starting at 6 o'clock. We're going to get a little into more stuff from Atlanta, Columbus, stuff from the weekend in MLS. We'll run through in depth the weekend tomorrow as we look ahead to the games on Wednesday. But we're also going to get you set for the Champions League in Europe getting started this week, starting tomorrow. We'll look back at the results from the weekend in all the major leagues in Europe and South America and Mexico as well, and kind of give you the lay of the land at this stage of the season. Lots of stuff to talk about on Soccer Over There. Come join us at the Brew House from 6 to 8. Come ask your questions live. Otherwise, tweet them at us and listen on the app and on soccerdownhere.net and on Spreaker. But until 6 o'clock, mucho plata, y'all.
Mucho Maradona, y'all.